welcome to another episode of Beverly Arts Talk, a podcast brought to you by the Beverly Arts Center. This is your host, Matt McKinney. Some events coming up at the Beverly Arts Center. Get Spooky, free virtual evening from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. on October 25th. This free online event will include spooky stories read by professional actors, a spooky dance routine taught by professional dancers, and a fall-themed craft demo with free supply kits to be picked up at the Beverly Arts Center beginning Monday, October 19th at 10 a.m. Register online by October 24th, 2020 to obtain link for event. Then come online to our virtual reading of the play Front Porch Society on October 25th at 3 p.m. Front Porch Society takes place on November 4th, 2008, Marks, Mississippi. America is on the eve of electing its first black president. Amidst the town's excitement over Barack Obama, Carrie Honey grieves her son's tragic death at the hands of police. After 40 years of failed attempts to seek justice, Carrie has grown bitter and is no longer interested in life celebrations. But when a scandal at the town cemetery, where her son was laid to rest, rocks this historic day, a past secret is revealed that restores her faded faith. Find tickets for these events on our website at www.beverlyartscenter.org. Today, we have an interview with artist Elaine Miller, who will be having an exhibit titled Remnants Remains at the Beverly Arts Center with an opening reception in the Simmerling Gallery from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. on September 25th and running through November 8th. Elaine will be talking to us a little bit about her works, inspirations, common themes, her artistic process, her subject matters on the natural world, and what her newest exhibit, Remnants Remains, means to her. Welcome to the podcast, Elaine.
Thank you.
Tell me a little bit about this exhibit that you are going to be premiering.
It's all new work from the last year. I'm doing 4 large pieces that are 8 by 10 feet. And they're based on the seasons in the Dan Ryan Woods, which is the local forest preserve. Which is right by my house, so I'm really lucky. I walk my dog there every morning, and it just has become a really important part of my life and day to just be able to. It's just a little remnant. The name of my show is Remnants and Remains because it feels like a very small, just a little castaway part of what our ecosystem used to be. And it's just a little remnant, but it's very important to me, and I think to the community, especially now during this pandemic.
Yeah. What originally drew you to that subject matter?
I've always been concerned about the environment. I hate to use the word environmentalist because it's been, it's gotten a lot of bad attachments to that word. So I've always been a nature lover and an animal lover. And my work has been concerned with pollution and climate change and, forever. Ever since I started making art in my 20s, in art school. I think, it was too easy to get on a soapbox about it. And so I tried to avoid that over the years and just make it be about what's important about nature is our emotional and spiritual connections to it. But it's not about just how beautiful and awesome nature is, because I realized after a while, there's no way you can, there's photographs that even the best photographer can't really convey that, just, a sunset or a mountain range. So I'm trying with my work to bring across an emotional connection and also a documentation of the struggles that the natural world is going through.
In what ways right now do you think humanity is respecting or disrespecting that natural world? And also, I mean, we live in an urban environment, so it's very interesting to have these paintings of the natural world when we live in an environment that doesn't seem to have a lot of that natural world around us. So yeah, one question I have is what ways in the urban environment can we respect that here? You know, you drive on the Dan Ryan and you see like trash everywhere, and a lot of our environment is it looks like it's dirty, like it's polluted. What can we do about that? And in the art world, I guess.
In the art world, I guess we can talk about it. Like I said, I didn't want to be on a soapbox about it anymore, but it's still like a venue to be able to discuss it, and everybody in an individual way. The good thing about Beverly is it's an urban neighborhood, but there is space here. There's large yard, people have huge yards. The population density is 5,000 per square mile. Where I moved here from Oak Park 5 years ago, and that population was, which is a suburb, 11,000 per square mile. So just because we're actually in the city of Chicago, I feel like there's Beverly is sort of a unique community and environment. And one thing we can all be doing is with our whatever yard space that you control, you don't have to use chemicals. You don't have to do leaf blowers to kill all the insects. You save your leaves, get rid of your grass. I mean, it's all stuff that's actually kind of easier than taking care of a lawn. But that's just like one level of it. The other level is so much more about the politics of our, what we're going through right now with the division and everything. When it comes down to it, we all, on some level, we all care about nature. I mean, there's very few people that don't care about it. And if they don't, they just haven't been exposed. We can all just be planting trees everywhere. There's a lot of space here to plant trees. And that, there's a lot of, studies that more trees, less crime. So it's all really, it's all like win-win stuff. That's simple. Right. If we just start talking about it,
right,
we just become aware of it.
Yeah, it's always kind of blown my mind how climate change and environmental issues even became a political issue.
Right. Well, because of the oil industry, I mean, why does a pandemic, a health crisis become political? I mean, that's just crazy.
Right.
It's crazy.
And everything at this point. Although I would say that, in my opinion, a lot of, I would say most artwork is inherently political in its own right. Whether you're politicizing a philosophy or a movement of some kind, or or a feeling that it's like Aristotle said, man is a political animal, and I think that's true, and it comes through in the arts.
Well, we're tribal too. In that same sense, I think, that that's evolution, that we evolved from tribes. But why can't we be, then maybe we should start in Beverly. We're the Beverly tribe, and it doesn't have to be about, blue lives or black lives. I mean, we're all like Chicagoans, and we all have to depend on each other at some point, but we most definitely have to depend on our ecosystem. And it's just incredibly scary to me that no one cares, or they're so unaware that the insects are collapsing and the birds are collapsing. And so what I do, and I'm a big gardener, and I am trying, I've lived here for 5 years, and I have a fair-sized yard that was just totally overgrown. So my garden is my other obsession. From, I do have a few some series of paintings that are about suburban gardens and about, that dichotomy between us wanting to control nature and trim our shrubs into little shapes and, um, just different ways of looking at nature and how we want to interact with it.
Yeah. And Elaine, uh, so it sounds like you've always been drawn to nature and as a subject in the arts. When you were first starting painting, was that the same thing? Is that what you always wanted to create and have as a subject?
Yes, I've always been attracted to the landscape, and that's almost always been my subject matter. And sometimes I do add some humans in, like I did a refugees series, but it's always about, the the people are very small and they're part of the landscape element. They start to create the landscape space sometimes, and because that's how I see us. What's more important between man and nature? Well, nature, of course.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
How did you start painting? How did you get your start? Was it a teaching artist, a mentor?
no, I was first an English major and a journalism major. And I hated my journalism class, but I loved going to my art classes. And so my undergrad is in printmaking, and I love processes and experimenting with processes, and I still do that with paint. A lot of times is I like to experiment with different materials, um, and then I went to grad school as a printmaker, and I started experimenting a lot with monoprinting and with handmade paper and making editions in handmade paper. And then my printmaking teacher was like, this is not a print anymore. And he said, you should go to painting because I don't think this is printmaking anymore. So I ended up getting my MA and then going somewhere else to get and finish my MFA in painting. So I finished up by my last year at NIU, and started coming in Chicago on weekends and stuff, and I just loved the energy. And so I moved to Chicago, and I started after a while I started working as a scenic artist and painting backdrops for commercials and film. And that's where I really learned about painting. So I was painting 8 hours a day, you know, sometimes a lot more. And I was under, a lot of deadlines, and you had to paint a lot of different stuff, and you had no idea what you were going to have to do. And so, I learned the mechanics of painting. And, to this day, sometimes I still think about scenic techniques, like I'm trying to incorporate them more with fine art techniques because they are two different styles of painting. And I realized that some scenic painters don't know about some fine art techniques and vice versa, and it's kind of weird. It's like, wow, you could do it this way, So I'm trying to kind of incorporate them.
Yeah, it's really cool. So when you first come to a painting, what's like the first thing that comes to mind, or is it like different every time? I'm always fascinated by the way visual artists work and their whole process. So what happens? Do you have a blank canvas, and then what do you do? Can you run me through your process?
So I usually do just a little thumbnail, just in like a little a sketchbook. but it's usually like a waste of time. I feel like, just because I like sort of have this idea in my head, but I also, I don't know if you can see, I have a lot of, probably not. I take photographs and print them out. And a lot of what's up in my studio right now is photographs from the Dan Ryan Woods. And so I'll just take an element from this photograph and an element for this. And sometimes just the photograph will be the whole inspiration, I'm trying to sort of flatten and abstract things out too, because it's not about the real space. I don't, like I said earlier, I don't want it to be just a record that you could take a photograph of, the light coming through here or whatever. It's more about an emotional response. It's more about different layers of reality, or different ways you can look at something. You can look at it as just sort of a document, or a record, or you can try to have some emotional connection what it's about. So going back to the scenic artist thing, so now on these bigger pieces, and even some on my smaller pieces, I usually start with acrylic or latex, acrylic wash, or just house paint. And I do the first layer really fast. And that's like the most fun time, because I haven't like, what am I going to do next on it? I just have fun. And then, so on these big pieces, I'd spend like, on these 8x10s, I'd spend like maybe a few days laying it out with latex, and it will look pretty good, like, yeah, I'm almost done, and then I get the oil paint out, and I, that's about trying to resolve it compositionally, and that takes, on these 8x10s, anywhere from a few weeks to a few months. So it just depends on, sometimes the composition falls, works like I thought it was going to when I laid it out in a tiny little thumbnail, and sometimes it's like, oh my God, I should have thought this one through more.
When do you know that you're done with a painting? Is there a moment that kind of hits you? You're like, yep, I'm okay with that. I'm good with that.
Yeah, it's really hard to say. This one right behind me, this is the summer one. It felt, the idea of this, I don't know, should I show you this, or can you see it?
You can, yeah, sure.
Since we're on a podcast, I don't know, can you see it?
Will this be this will be at the exhibit?
Yes.
Well,
this is partially, it's a big dead tree branch.
Mm-hmm.
And it just worked right away. The play of the back and forth of the different layers worked right away, where you have a dark shape in front of the light coming through it. And that was the idea about how when you're walking through the forest, you get this sort of flickering sense of light. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like there's all these little light things happening. To me, it feels like the energy of the forest, and there's no way I can capture that on a two-dimensional, but I still kind of try to get that feeling, that of the way the light works in the forest.
Yeah, that reminds me of a Terrence Malick film, Tree of Life, where a lot of
I've been really wanting to see that. It's weird. I've been seeing a lot of little blurbs about it recently.
The cinematography is very, very good in it, and it has a lot of that moving camera work where you have the little bits of sun that kind of come through the trees, and he does that in a lot of his films, and it's very effective. Yeah,
I'd like to see it in a theater though, like in a big screen.
In an ideal world, a non-pandemic world, hopefully we can.
Right, but his films really, our best to see a lot. They're the kind of film that you want to see on a big screen.
Of course. So going back to your process, as a musician, I'm going to ask, do you listen to music when you are painting, or do you work better with the silence?
I listen to music, or I listen to podcasts, and I also listen to NPR a lot because I'm just a political junkie, and so I'm very obsessed. I feel like sometimes music is it just depends, but sometimes I get distracted by it, because I'm like, I don't want to listen to that song. And then, all right, when you have Spotify, you're like, oh my God, I want to, there's almost too much. And, but sometimes, like when I really need my energy level up or something, I'll put on some really upbeat music. So I think that makes a big difference. If like I'm listening to something that's kind of melancholy or whatever, in your when you're working,
Yeah, I mean, I think instrumental music is probably the best for any kind of work. If I'm if I'm just working on if I'm writing, especially, I do like to write a lot. I like to have music on. I like to have instrumentals, film scores, classical music, ambient music, that kind of thing. But yeah, I think if it gets to songs with words can kind of it's harder to work with that. But yeah, I've always been fascinated with the what goes on in an artist's mind when they're painting, and how do you create your environment. I'm sure the environment has to be exactly the way you want it to feel comfortable to work in the area.
I always feel like it takes me about an hour of digging around before I can really start painting. It's just like, oh my God, it's just like ridiculous sometimes. Like to get in the mindset, I wish I could just, get up and start painting. But so I guess that's why, I listen to, it's hard to not get obsessed politically right now.
It is.
But
Yet it seems very unhealthy too.
it does. Like sometimes I'm just like, okay, I am just going to listen to music, and I'm not, I'm going to just try to ignore it for a while, because when it really starts to get you down.
I try to take it in during certain times of the day, because I feel like news 24/7, that is just a way of really taking in so much emotion that is not the best for your mental health. If you're ingesting it constantly like that. And so I like to look at the headlines, know what's going on. But if it's, it can be very distracting. I mean, you get,
It can be, yeah.
it gives you, immediate news headlines that come through. You're always on, you're always online, right? So you can be like, I wonder what's happening in the Chicago Tribune right now. And suddenly you're distracted again,
Right.
into a rabbit hole of the news. And then before you know it, you're like, oh, all I've done is look at the news today. And it was very easy to do that when the pandemic started. It was just like, you had no idea.
Right.
So, but now it's kind of it's like just bad news. So I'm like,
Well, I had a hard time painting during the pandemic, because in my studio, I'm like, there's no reason for me not to come here, because I share with 3 other artists, but it's usually just me here. I have my own separate space. So, so I came all the time during the pandemic when my husband wasn't going to work, but I would just be like, I was like, what am I doing here? And it really I was kind of cruising on these 4 pieces for the show. It was originally opening May 2nd. And then, that's why I feel like this very last piece, which was Spring, I had such a hard time with, because I just couldn't focus on it. It was just like, this seems really silly. It's like So anyway, I'm finishing it today, finally. It's in the next room. I have 2 rooms in my studio. So
Wow. Yeah. And you'll know when you know, right? When it's done.
Yeah, sometimes you just run out of time. Or, it's just not getting any better. I mean, you're not really adding to it.
Right.
So,
Right. And in music, it's that can happen too, where you edit a song so many times. As a songwriter, I know this because you you sometimes go through like so many edits, and by the end, you're like, this is nowhere near where where the original was. I don't even know if the song is about what I originally intended it to be about.
so
And
it gets overworked. I mean, that happens in a painting sometimes. It just gets overworked. And no matter what you do, you cannot get it back where it was, like the time machine on your Mac, if only I could go back.
yes, well, luckily in music
With
technology,
the song, right? You could go back and
you can go back to certain edits and be like, yeah, let's keep it in this direction maybe, as I go forward. So, and then of course, if you on a computer, you have it saved at different points in time, so you can go back to different edits. Obviously, with painting, you can't do that as much.
that's what I mean. Once it's overworked, sometimes it's just trash. It's just out. And then you really hate it by then too. So it's like, you can't even, I feel like right now I can't even see this work. It's actually so big that I can't even get that far back from it because both these rooms are fairly small. So when gets installed next week, it'll be really interesting to see how they look.
Have there been paintings that you've just thrown away that you were like, yeah?
Oh my God, yes. Over the years, there's been tons. Sometimes I'm looking through my, what pictures, photos I have of my work, and I'll be like, oh yeah, that's gone. It's like, I'll throw it out even after it's been photographed and, done. And then later on, I'll just be like, or a lot of times I'll just go back and start working on it again. And then it's one of those overworked things that you just can't do anything with. And it's like, okay. But I'm like kind of, I'm feeling lately like, well, I'm learning a lot, you know. I'm trying to just see it that way, as it's not a failure. It's just like I just really learned a lot and I can see my work progressing, you know, and I'm happier with it when I see it progressing, you know.
Is there a style of painting or even just a piece of artwork that you hate, that you loathe, that you just you don't think it's emotive or in some way? I like sometimes asking artists what they don't like.
Well, a lot of surrealism from, the beginnings of surrealism. It's just not my thing, surrealism and fantasy.
Mhm.
That's in books too. Like I don't read fantasy and stuff. But then I have a couple very good friends that work in that kind of pop surrealist mode now, and I know them, and I've learned through their work, to appreciate it more. It just doesn't come naturally to me, It's just sort of this very graphic, kind of uh, bright, poppy stuff, and it doesn't come naturally to me at all. I'm
Mhm.
very much. I think of my work as magic realism. That's a style of literature that I like a lot too. And so I'm just naturally a realist, but realism by itself is kind of boring. It's just about technique. It's sort of meant to impress with your technical skills.
Mhm.
And I think once you have X amount of technical skills, it's sort of like, okay, so what? Like I can still make them a little better, but it's just technique, you know.
Right, right. Elaine, where else can we find your artwork right now?
I just got a new website updated, and that's www.emillerstudio.com. And right now I have some pieces at Oak and Bloom on 99th and Walden for the Alt Walk, the Beverly Art Walk, which is now the Alt Walk. So that's the next couple of Thursday nights. They'll be out there in their windows. I think the store will be open, and I'm actually going to try to do some little pieces, signs, those yard signs. I'm going to try to do those next week for the last art walk. They'll be out there in 99th and Walden, and they will of course have a political bent.
Yeah. All right. Well, Elaine Miller, thank you for coming on the show. I'm looking forward to seeing your artwork up in the Simmerling Gallery. That will be September 25th from 6 to 8. That's your opening. And it's going to go till November 8th. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Well, it was great talking with you, Matt.
It was great talking with you too, Elaine. Thanks a lot for coming on the show. You can see Elaine Miller's exhibit starting on September 25th and running through November 8th, and find her other works on her website at emillerstudio.com. Thanks again for listening to another episode of Beverly Arts Talk. This has been your host, Matt McKinney, with artist Elaine Miller. We'll see you again, but in the meantime, please be well and be safe.